My dear brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus, I welcome you to the 55th class of our in-depth Bible study series, and we continue in our study on why evil is allowed by God, and this is the third part. In our previous class we saw that God has a purpose in permitting evil in the world, and the purpose we saw was to educate all his creation about how sinful sin actually is. So for that reason, God allowed bad things to happen, people to do bad things, Satan in doing all bad things, and since man also was in line with Satan, so God allowed all of them to do as they like, and result of which they experience, and in that way they learn the difference between good and evil. Well, when we say God permitted evil, there is a certain verse which we have to understand properly, because God has a foreknowledge of all that will happen, but that doesn't mean that God created evil. So foreknowledge and predestination are two different things. Because when we read in Proverbs chapter 16 verse 4, we read like this. It says, "The Lord made everything for himself, even the wicked for the day of trouble." You see, God made everything for himself. Means there is a purpose in doing everything that he did. And then it says, even the wicked for the day of trouble. So it looks as if that God made the wicked. In our last class we clarified that God did not create the wicked, in the sense that God did not create Satan. God created a holy angel, but later on he became wicked. And that's how man also was in the image of God, was perfect, until he chose to do wicked things and go against God's law and became selfish and started doing evil things. But here when it says, God hath made the wicked for the day of trouble, what it actually means is that God knew that some people will become wicked. God knew that Lucifer will become Satan, yet he created him and kept him in the Garden of Eden. God knew that Adam would sin in the given circumstance. So in that way, even though God knew it, God still created them, because he had a purpose in the evil also. But that doesn't mean that God made them evil or God wanted them to do evil. Like for instance, the selection of the apostles by our Lord. The Lord chose 12 people, but of them one was Judas Iscariot, who would later on betray him. So the Lord knew that he would betray him, yet he chose him. But that doesn't mean that God made him to betray him, as some would have it be. Some say that since God had already prophesied, Judas could not do anything otherwise, and therefore he was compelled by God himself to do what he did. No. God knew he would do such a thing. God knew what he would do, how he would react. But that doesn't mean that God wanted him to do that or God made him do that. That should be very clear. The foreknowledge of God is not the same as the predestination of God. Predestined means God has destined something and no one can change it. But that is not what happens in this permission of evil. God knew what certain people would do, but that doesn't mean that he made them do it. But God selected such a person in order to fulfill his prophecy and in order to bring forth the exceeding sinfulness of sin through them. A very good example for this is in Exodus chapter 9 verse 16. This is about Pharaoh. You know, the people of Israel were slaves in Egypt for a very long time. And then God sent Moses, and Moses went and spoke to the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh would not let them go. And therefore God had to do 10 wonders and bring them out. So in this context, we read God saying, "And in very deed, for this cause have I raised thee up, For to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the world. So God is here saying that, and in very deed for this cause have I raised thee up, so that in thee I might show my power to all the world. So what does it mean? God kept that Pharaoh there. God raised him up, that particular man, to be Pharaoh at that particular time. Because only when such a Pharaoh was there, as we find was there in the time of Moses, God could show forth his power. Because he was such a stubborn and hard-hearted and persistent in keeping them there, and he was a very different character, we can see. Because so many times he would say he will let them go, but again he changed his mind, hardened his mind, and he would not let them go. So he served the purpose of God. Because just imagine if there was a Pharaoh who was meek and who was peaceable type. So when Moses put that rod and made it a serpent, and later on even the Egyptians did the same, but the serpent which Moses brought forth devoured all the other serpents, any sensible man would have realized that the God of Moses was more powerful than the gods of Egypt, and would just let them go. And if he had done that, people of Israel would have just walked out and come to the land of Canaan. And they would not remember much of it, because it would have been an easy exodus. But just because there was this Pharaoh who was so hard-hearted, who hardened his mind so many times, that God had to repeatedly do wonders after wonders, so much so that the people of Israel saw clearly what God's power was and how wonderful things he did to bring them out. Isn't it? Even after the last plague, in which all the firstborns were killed, he let them go, but again he pursued after them, so much so that God had to open the Red Sea and make the people of Israel walk through it, and later on he drowned all the Egyptians there. See, all this would not have happened if there was another man as Pharaoh at that time. So that's why God says, and in very deed for this cause have I raised thee up, for to show in thee my power, and that all the world may know my power. So in order for God to show forth his power, he needed such an opponent there. So this applies to Satan also. So Satan is such a person. So if there was any other angel being kept in Garden of Eden, he would not rebel so much, and he would not continue to work against God. But this Lucifer, God knew he was so proud, and he would become so proud rather, and he would not give up, but harden his heart so much, and he would continue in his evil ways. And that way God permitted him to do all these things. So even in all this wicked, God's purpose is being carried out. So this is because of the foreknowledge of God and the wisdom of God. So in all this we can see God's power and God's wisdom. Just as we saw God's justice in punishing them and giving the law and all that, and God's love in sending his Son to save them from sin, God's power and God's wisdom is seen in allowing Satan to do all these wicked things even up to this day. Because God in all this is teaching mankind unforgettable lessons of what evil is, what bad thing is, and what evil could do to mankind. So, brothers and sisters, in this context only, when we read the same text as we read about Pharaoh, in Romans chapter 7, Paul here is explaining to us about the foreknowledge of God and how God chooses some people in order to bring forth his power and glory known unto all the people. So in Romans 7, he is talking about Rebecca. And when she was pregnant, there was these twins in her womb. And we know that even before the children were born, God chose the younger one. That we see in Romans 9:10 onwards. Romans 9:10. And not only this, but when Rebecca also had conceived by one, even by her father Isaac, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works but of him that calleth, it was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. Even before the children could be born and do good or evil, God had said that the elder will become a servant to the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. So God also said, I have loved Jacob, the younger one, and Esau I hated. Even before they were born and could do any good or bad, God preferred the younger one and loved him and hated Esau, it says. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid. For he said to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of God that sheweth mercy. He says all these things, and then now talks about Pharaoh. For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might shew my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. So he says, for this same purpose have I raised thee up. So he raised that particular Pharaoh up at that time in order to show forth his power. So that's what I already told you, how God chose that and what was the purpose of choosing that particular Pharaoh. Verse 18, therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he hardeneth. So hardeneth means he knew that such a person would harden himself, and God would let him harden himself. That's what happened in the case of Pharaoh. Verse 19, thou wilt say then unto me, why doth he yet find fault? For who hath resisted his will? So if God is choosing whom he wants to choose, if God decides whom he will love and whom he will hate and all that, then he says, why doth he yet find fault? Why does he find fault? Because nobody can resist his will. And then he says, nay, but, O man, who art thou that replies against God? Shall the thing formed say unto him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? Hath not the potter power over the clay, the same lump, to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? So, in saying all this, when the question is raised, why doth God find fault? He says, how can you reply God? Means how can you, the clay ask the potter, why you have done thus? So, why he says this is in the sense that God has complete knowledge of what will happen even before it has happened, isn't it? That we see in Isaiah 46:10, where God says, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient of times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will do all my pleasure. So here he's saying, he's declaring the end from the beginning. Even before things can happen, God knows how it will happen. How? In the sense, the children were in the womb, being not yet born, they have not done anything, yet God knows what they will do. Because their character is in their genes. Today we have learned so much about the genes, and even before a child is fully formed, doctors can find out if that child is going to be handicapped or if it is going to have any disease or serious problem, and then choose about whether to continue to grow or to abort it. That is the technology. Even before the embryo is fully formed, studying the genes, they can find out so many things. In that same way, God the Creator, you see the potter, He knows what Esau will do and what Jacob will do even before they are born. And that's why we should not question God's choice, because He has so much knowledge than us. So in that way, and He has a purpose in everything. He has a purpose in Esau, He has a purpose in Jacob, He has a purpose in Pharaoh, and He has a purpose in Satan. So even though God knew what they would do, God still created them and let them do all these things, because in them His power may be made known to the whole world. So in that context, we understand that God made the wicked for the day of trouble, and He made everything to fulfill His purposes. As we read in Isaiah, I will do all my pleasure. What all He wants, He will achieve it. So even in permitting evil, God is achieving His purpose. And the purpose is that the people are now experiencing and finding out what evil is. And that would be very, very important for themselves. And that will help them to avoid evil in future. So, brothers and sisters, for this purpose, God permitted the devil and mankind to do whatever they like, to live how they like. And what man did? Man became very selfish right from the beginning. Because when God said, you should eat bread from the sweat of thy brow, no, he should earn for it, he should work hard. But they don't want to work hard. Everybody will try to somehow push the work on someone else so that they can be free, isn't it? And you see, in that concept only these wars took place. They began to fight against one another and then started taking slaves from the defeated people and keeping them to do all their works. Now we know how evil slavery is. God permitted that so that people can know what evil, what selfishness will lead to. Even now there are people who are living like slaves. The employers will make them work so much beyond their working limit and all that. But in those days, you can imagine, up to this 19th century, slavery was practiced everywhere. Just imagine, the slave is supposed to do whatever the owner says. There is no time working hours, there is no rights for the slave, and he can't talk back, he can't refuse to do anything. In those days, the owner had the right even to kill his own slave, because he would say, I would do whatever I want to my slave. After all, I brought him with a price. And they had to work all their life. Every day and night they have to do this hard work, difficult work, all their lives. So just imagine how evil that is. So God permitted that. This is the selfishness of man that do all these things. And later on, what jealousy can do. We saw that in the life of Cain and Abel. Cain became jealous, and in that jealous rage, he killed his brother. So what jealousy is, what pride can do. We saw in Satan how he turned against God himself because of his pride. And not only that, in the life of each and every individual, what happens when people are proud, how proud people they behave, and how evil and wicked that pride can do. So God has permitted what greed can do and what anger can do. You see, in the moment of anger, what all people have done, all this God has permitted right through the 6,000 years. And what lies can do, what cheating can do, and what adultery can do, what alcoholism can do, what laziness, everything God has permitted. And people do all these wrong things, and they suffer, and others suffer because of that. And the whole world is suffering because of all this selfishness and evil things. And God permitted all these things. Every day it's a lesson, isn't it? Being at the end of the 6,000 years, now we are seeing sin in its maximum level, isn't it? Sin started in the Garden of Eden, but it began to increase, and so much so that today there is so much sin all around. And because of sin, there is so much suffering. Isn't it? God has permitted this. How to the extent of destroying one another completely. Isn't it? That's what the 6,000 years of permission of evil has brought mankind into. So much injustice and inequality in this world today. So much crime and so much sorrow. All that we can see going on every day and in this world, isn't it? From the effects of smoking cigarette to the effects of a nuclear bomb explosion, everything God has permitted. What will happen if we do all these things? What will be the result like? So much so that we are on the verge of destroying ourselves. Brothers and sisters, this God permitted all these things to happen, and this suffering, one does wrong and others suffer, so many others suffer, isn't it? And we all suffer. And sometimes we say innocent people are also suffering. Actually, no one is literally innocent except the infant in the womb, unborn child, or the infants. No one is actually innocent, because we may be innocent in that particular situation. We may not have anything to do with that particular situation. We might be the victims, but that doesn't mean that we have not done wrong at all. Someone else does wrong and we are now at the receiving end, but we do wrong and others will suffer because of that. So this is how God has permitted it to happen, isn't it? Some of us may not be guilty of certain sins. Like I myself, in all my life, I can't remember a single instance in which I have stolen anything from anybody. That never happened because of my upbringing. My parents were Christians and they taught me that this is wrong, and they provided all that we needed. Since we did not have that lack of anything, whatever we wanted they gave, so we didn't have that necessity to steal also. And later on we continued in that way. But that doesn't mean that we are not guilty of other sins. So some of us may be innocent in some ways, but in other ways we are also guilty. And so God has permitted this generally. Sometimes we are victimized and sometimes we are the ones who cause the trouble, and somehow or the other every day it's such a lesson, hard lesson. And the world in which we live, the selfish world, the sinful world, has become so horrible and unbearable. We see so much injustice. Injustice, like not only we feel that when we are standing in a line for something, we are to be served according to the first come first serve basis, but some people just jump the line. And how we feel when that happens? We feel very bad, isn't it? And even those who are doing service in a government office or in some education institution or somewhere, even though we are in the line and we have been waiting, they will start serving others in the wrong way, and we feel bad, isn't it? It's a very small thing. But in the same way, injustice has gone to such level that even in court, justice is not given to us. Usually in the courts in India, the judicial system has become so slow that even a very simple case will take years to get judgment. Like for instance, my mother had rent out a small place to a person on a written agreement for 11 months. And after 11 months, the agreement was that there would be a small hike in the rent, and it would be continued for another 1 year, 11 months, like that. That's how usually things are carried out. But then one person who came stayed for 11 months and he refused to pay that hike after 11 months, and he refused to vacate the place also. He continued to stay there, and he stopped paying rent and started using the place for many years. And finally, he locked that place. He did not hand over the place to us. And water came in and it damaged the building so much. After that, my mother went to court. It's a very simple matter. You see, according to the agreement, the person agreed to pay such a rent and for such a duration, and after which he has to vacate. If he is not willing to pay the hike, he has to simply vacate. But he didn't do that. He continued to overstay, and he stopped paying the rent also. And then he caused such damage to the building. And what's there in this case? It's a clear case of injustice done to my mother. But my mother had to go so many years to the court. How many times she has to go, and just the judge would see that, and he would just keep on postponing. Either their lawyer would not be present or our lawyer would not be present. Something or other. It went on for over 5 years. More than 5 years it took for the decree to be given. And by this time, my mother already in the advanced stage, she lost all the case itself. She forgot about the case only. As they say, justice delayed is justice denied. You see, this is what is happening. Such a simple matter as this. In one day, the judgment could have been given. Just one day is enough to look at the documents and then to give a decision. But it took more than 5 years. And even after the decree is given, the court asks us to go, and there's a long process. We have to bring that person. We have to attach his assets, and if he refuses to pay, we have to do everything. So this is the world in which we are living. There's so much injustice everywhere, and everyone is suffering, and suffering from our own ways, and in various incidents in life. Every day it is so hard, and we realize how evil this sin is. And there is so much of misuse of authority. People in authority in government offices, or in police, or in academic institutions, or in businesses. Those who are at the place of authority, they misuse their authority, they misuse their rights and swindle people. They take bribes and they give partiality, and all these things is happening, isn't it? And in one or the other way, we all are suffering because of evil. And sometimes what might be a very small mistake can cause a person to lose his life also, can create so much disturbance and difficulty for others. Like for instance, some people would have parked their car on the main road, and there will be so much traffic that because of that parked car, there will be a traffic jam there. And so many people, thousands of people will be affected because of one person who has parked the car in the wrong place. Or sometimes they park their vehicles on the highway, and because of this, some speeding vehicles, they can't see that and they come and hit it. And so many people are losing lives in this way. In a recent newspaper, it came that 75% of the accidents are caused by human error. You see, more than 75% of accidents are because of human error, either because of jumping a signal light, or over speeding, or driving in the wrong direction, parking in the wrong way. All these things, simple things, it may look like, what is there if I just jump a signal? But so many instances that will result in accidents which will lead to death also. And this is happening so much all over the world. So in this way, small things, it might be like people doing shabby work. So many times we hire people to do some work and they will not do it properly. And all the time and money is wasted. No, we feel how we feel when we realize we have been cheated, isn't it? So, and this delay in doing some works, and all this is cause for so much heartache and suffering. And for instance, a patient goes to the doctor and doctor examines and writes the medicine on a prescription sheet, isn't it? We all have heard about the handwriting of doctors. They don't write it properly. And because of a doctor's bad handwriting, do you know that 7,000 people are killed every year all around the world? Just because of doctor's handwriting. Now, because of doctor's negligence or wrong diagnosis and carelessness, that is different. Only due to doctor's bad handwriting, 7,000 people are actually dying. You forget about so many people who are having side effects and who suffer because of all this. People who die itself is 7,000. Just imagine, just because the doctors, they don't write properly. They should write clearly, isn't it? Whatever medicine prescribed and the dosage, everything they should write. But so often we can't make out what they write. And last week I experienced this. My mother, who is in her 80s, she has a heart condition, and we used to take her to a big hospital every year for the regular checkup. But this time we thought we will take her to another cardiologist who is close by, and to see what medication has to be given and all that. And that doctor, when he saw the previous prescription, he has to see that, and based on that he has to tell us whether we should continue the same medicine or any changes in the dosage and all that he has to say. But of the 4 medication that was written by the earlier doctor, one medicine he could not even read what it was. He tried 2-3 times to understand what he had written, but he could not, and finally said, I don't know what he has written. So one doctor's handwriting, another doctor himself could not understand. So that was the case. And so often, we take it to the drug shop, and normally the medical stores person, he will immediately give the medicine. So we wonder how he could read what we can't read. But we think he has read it properly, but how do we know that he has read it properly? They just would have given some medicine, because after all, for them, they should have the business. So, brothers and sisters, even this dosage they write, usually how many tablets in the morning and afternoon and night. For that, 1 or 2 or 0, they write like that. Even that they don't write properly. They just write like they scribble something. We don't know later on whether I have to take it in the morning or night, or how many I have to take. That dosage also will not know. So simple like things like that we feel, but it can cause so much trouble to others. Nowadays they are trying to bring a rule that all the doctors, instead of writing, they should give prints of the prescription. But anyway, already so much damage is already done. So in this way, brothers and sisters, God permitted all these things to happen, so that every day it is a big lesson. And not only those who are in authority, but those who are in leadership also. What all will happen if the full power is with one person, like in monarchy or autocracy, where one person is a king, monarch, and he has whole power on the entire country. Imagine how it would be. God permitted all this so that people will know. These kings, they would do anything according to their whim and fancy. If they don't like somebody, they can kill somebody. Whomever they want, they can show favoritism. Whatever decisions they want, they can take. Nobody will question them. And he did not ask from anyone. That's how the situation, but God permitted that. But we found out what people faced in that condition, isn't it? No one was happy when this monarchy was going on. And even today in some small places it's happening, but most of the places it is stopped. And then God permitted theocracy. So theocracy is a condition in which the leaders are religious leaders. The basis of their ruling, they get their power because they are religious rulers, and based on their religion they become the leaders. Like in Iran, you have the Ayatollah, who is the religious head, who is also the ruler. And such a same thing is happening in Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Sudan, and even in Vatican. The Pope is like the monarch there. This is a theocratic setup. But what happens in theocracy also we have seen. How it is in Iran, how much human rights violation is taking place in all these places. In Afghanistan mainly, these people who are fundamental Muslims, they try to enforce everybody according to their knowledge of their religion. And we all know what's happening there in Afghanistan. So that didn't work out. And for a time, monocracy and theocracy were combined together, like what happened in Europe when the popes began to rise and rule with the kings of Rome and in other countries in Europe. And that also could not bring in justice or happiness or peace in this world. And later on, God permitted communism. You see, everything the communist leaders will follow, and they try to enforce, and so that all will have equal share. But that also didn't work out. Like as in China and Vietnam, Cuba, North Korea, in all these places where communism has been for a long time, there is no perfect life there. Because God permitted all this just to prove that they are not the answer. And finally God permitted democracy. Democracy is where the people elect their leaders. So the right is with people. They choose their own leaders to lead them, protect them, guide them, and all that. But we know how utterly this democracy has failed. In India, we are proud to call ourselves as the largest democracy in the world. But we know the situation we are living in. We are in 118th place in the happiness index. You see, because we all know how much democracy has failed here. Because the people are not having that knowledge to elect the right person. Most of the people are ignorant. They do not know anything about these elections, which election it is, whom they have to elect, what these people can do. Most of them, they don't have any idea about how the system works. So all they know is the time comes, they need to vote. And for that, in India, most of the poor class people, they vote for those who give them money. And though it is wrong, yet these political parties, they will offer 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, and they buy them off. So these people, they don't think about their country, their future, or their leaders and anything. They just go and vote for money. So such is the ignorance. And also, if there is offered a choice between one person who is very educated and has a reputation for honesty and all that, and there's another person who is a movie star, a film actor, most of the people will vote for the actor, not for the person with all the experience and knowledge and all that. Because that's how it is. How many people have become chief ministers because of their acting career? Not only in India, but even Ronald Reagan was an actor, and that's how people choose him. Because they look at him, look at these actors acting in movies as good people and wise people and all, and they think that in real life also there will be such people. And God permitted all these things. God permitted kings and monarchs and communists, dictators like Hitler and Stalin and all these people to come and do whatever they like, just to show how it will be under this leadership. So, brothers and sisters, God permitted all these things, and finally we have come to the stage in which all this freedom and choice of doing what they like ultimately has brought in so much inequality and injustice and violence and crime in this world. Like for instance, the present situation of differences between the rich and poor is so wide, it's almost unbelievable. It has become even worse after this corona lockdown. 1% of the population in the world, they possess 67% of wealth, it seems. 67% of world's wealth is with 1% of population. The rest 99% population have to divide 30% of the wealth. Just see how wide is the gap between the rich and the poor. That is the situation, brothers and sisters. Imagine this. There are 100 people in a hall, and all the 100 people have to eat. They are all hungry. And there is 100 loaves of bread. But the situation today is one person is holding 67 loaves of bread, and the remainder 99 people there in the hall have to divide the 30 loaves of bread. In that, what will happen? Again, that will continue. Some will have more and some will have less, and so much so that so many millions of people don't have the proper food also. So much hunger. Children are dying because of hunger. Why? Because of this greed, this selfishness of man. One economist clearly described these different stages between the rich and poor, and he said, first of all, the very poor are those who do not even have 3 meals a day and do not have proper clothes and do not have a shelter over their head. That he described as a very, very poor people. And then you have the poor people in which these 3 meals a day is there, and they have clothes and they have a shelter. All this not in the best quality, but they have this, but they have almost nothing for entertainment. To be happy, they don't have anything. So they somehow can manage 3 meals and they have some sort of food and clothing, but all in a poor condition. That is the poor state. And next you have the middle class. In middle class you have the lower middle class and upper middle class. This is lower middle class people. They have the basic food, cloth and shelter. And then they have enough to be happy for their entertainment. And then they can save up to 10 to 20% of their income. So after having all they need for their basic requirement and entertainment, they still have some 10 to 20% carryover remaining, which they can save. That is the lower middle class. And then you have the upper middle class. After having all their needs met, the basic needs and their entertainment, they can save from 50 to 60%. That is the upper middle class. So in every month income, whatever they get, in 50% all their needs and entertainment is met, and 50% they save it. That is the upper middle class. Now as I'm telling you, you can see where you stand in this. Most of us are not in this upper middle class category also, we can say. Anyway, and then you have the rich class, in which case all the needs and entertainment will be done within the 10%, and they can save up to 90% of their income, and that they invest in business and all that. That is a rich class. And then you have the ultra rich, in which all the needs and entertainment, and you can imagine how their kind of spending would be and their entertainment would be. In spite of all that will be within the 0.1% of their income. So all the rest, almost everything they have, it is saved. So that is how that they become the 1%. You see, it is like one person in a hall of 100 is having 67 loaves of bread, which he will not eat. He cannot eat. But still he wants to hoard, and he will not give to others in need. So that is the situation here in the world today. That is what selfishness is. How evil this greediness, this materialism is. That's what we can understand. So this is not equal, isn't it? Because in what we call as income equality, in professional field also. In the same company, two people will be working, both working for the same amount of time, both working daily, coming and working. One person is a janitor, another person may be an engineer. Now this janitor, though he comes and does the work for same time, is given only 10,000 rupees, whereas an engineer takes 100,000 rupees. The salary is above 1 lakh. You see, of course, we need to recognize their educational qualification and all. They deserve something better. But the gap is too much, isn't it? Where is 10,000 and where is 100,000? Both have to work. But see how much difference there is. So like this, when we see all this is God permitted in order to show us what selfishness can do, what greed can do, what wickedness can do, brothers and sisters, and also so many things that are happening, evils that are happening, is because of man's selfishness. Like now there is this excessive flood in northern India. Rivers are all flowing above the safety level, and so many people are dying and so much loss. And we hear about the heat wave that is happening in Europe and all that. Now, man is to be blamed for all this also, isn't it? The global warming, the erratic climatic condition, all this also is the result of man's abuse of this planet. So much deforestation is taking place, and so many species of plants and animals are going extinct every day. Hundreds of species of animals and fishes are becoming extinct. Isn't it? All because of man's abuse of this planet, and so much pollution and emission of these harmful gases that is spoiling the atmosphere, and all this is happening. And finally we know that all this finally where it will lead to. Man, using the knowledge and technology, started building bombs that are so destructive, and you can imagine what will happen in the future. We thought all this will go away, but brothers and sisters, the Ukraine war has again brought the reality of the Third World War so close to us, isn't it? Often we see repeated in the news Russia saying that this might go to the Third World War. They might be forced to use nuclear weapons and all that. And we can imagine, and according to what the Bible says also, we will in the end destroy ourselves completely, isn't it? There is enough ammunition in the world to destroy this world, just to say some 12 times over and over again. So it might be more than that. So such is the situation, and all this God is permitting in order to make man realize what will happen if he breaks the most important laws, isn't it? The people asked Jesus, which is the greatest law? And Jesus said, the first and the foremost is that you love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, all the evils in the world and the suffering in the world is because of the violation of these two laws. First of all, God people do not love, isn't it? In fact, since the 19th century, this Darwin brought out this theory of evolution, which was just a theory in which he said that everything came into existence by accident, and by series of accidents over millions of years, earth was formed and water was formed, and in the water from amoeba, small creatures began to evolve and then come to different levels, and then become fishes, and then become mammals and monkeys, and then man came into existence. All this happened on its own. So that eliminated the need for God. If you believe evolution, then there is no God at all in this. It all happened on its own. The world was so eager to accept this. They accepted this theory in spite of so much evidence of God's creation. You see, the creation every flower, every leaf has the signature of a designer. God has created everything, this world, everything so perfectly, but still people deny that there is a God at all. And once this happened, you see, crime rate became even more. Because people, since there is no God, they are not accountable to anyone. They don't have to fear the day of judgment that God will ask us about what all we did. So there is nothing like there is no God. So we see so many statistics that where the people don't believe God, crime rate goes up, obviously. And then the second law was that love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbor means we are all from one family. God created Adam and Eve, and through them we all have come. In fact, the whole world is one family. If you have that concept, how it will be? But now, since the theory of evolution says that we all survived because we were stronger, the survival of the fittest theory, in which whoever was strong they survived and other weaker things they became extinct. So now that concept is what man will use. He wants to survive. He wants to be the strongest. So in that process he doesn't care for anybody. It's all about selfishness, his happiness, his survival. So that will make him so hard-hearted and he doesn't care for others. So selfish he becomes. And that's how the world is going on today. You see, so basically all because of man's sin, and God permitted all this, all through the 6,000 years, until it will be totally destroyed also. Because God wanted man to understand what sin will do, what evil is. God wanted him to experience, and man is experiencing and learning. Angels are looking at man and learning. But finally, one might ask, what use is there in this knowledge? A person will gain knowledge, of course. In the young age, he will live as he likes, but by the time he dies, he will learn, isn't it, what it will lead to. So he gets that understanding, he gets that experience, but what help will it be once he is dead? Since he is dead and become dust and gone, what is the use of getting this knowledge? Well, brothers and sisters, that is where we have to understand that God has a wonderful plan for the whole mankind. In that plan, when we understand, then all this why God permitted will make sense. And what that plan is, we will see in our next and final class. Until then, God be with you. Thank you.